You wouldn't stand up for one of the good ones down there, for one of the best ones down there. I know you ain't going to stand up for one of the less ones down there. So that's what is an indictment on the entire police department. Black, brown, red, yellow, and white. And then it was Foultech. Foultech, who wanted to charge them, who was over the homicide unit. And as I was told, it was Bernstein and Bernstein's wife Goldstein and Bielfeld that didn't want to charge any of the officers or any of those thugs, Rico, Suave, and the rest of them, who admitted that they attacked Officer Torbett, even though they saw him in the club with handcuffs on and with that Baltimore City Police badge around his neck. And his family still, of course, grieves and are asking for answers and justice around Officer William Torbett. So anytime they want to have that conversation with me, Melvin Russell, Dan Leoli, who's running around right now talking about protecting dogs. And here's a two-legged dog for Dan Leoli that they've moved up in the Baltimore City Police Department. That here was one of their community activists, Cleve Williams, who stabbed his wife, his ex-wife, I think her name was Veronica Williams, outside of the Harford Road courthouse after she went in for a hearing. And here was an arrest warrant that the Baltimore City Police Department had to serve on Cleve Williams, but yet he's texting to Dan Leoli telling him don't come in. No doubt Melvin Russell as well, who wants to be a jackleg, bootleg preacher right now. He got a lot more he going to have to jump over and get around in order to be that. But now these are the ones coming to you telling you that they're offering us up solutions when they've been a part of the pollution. They've been part of all of the diminution of responsibilities and duties in the city. Now say they want to be a part of the solution. Sorry, they can't be part of the solution, man. Only thing you're going to get is the SOS, the same old. So again, you tuned to the State of the City. Going to go to this quick musical break, man. Then when I come back in, I'm going to go national as we talk about, again, these distractions, these factions and fractions, and talk about our brother, the elder, Harry Belafonte, who is there in Tallahassee, Florida, standing with the young people there. But we're going to ask some questions. Again, why all of these distractions right now? And we'll get back into, of course, TRAYVON BEYOND, because we're going to move this beyond TRAYVON and ask the questions that need to be asked and begin to give some answers that need to be given, because we've been losing TRAYVONs all around this country, and we'll be having to ask why this one particular case? Why this one particular case? Or is this a psyops? Is this a psyop, psychological operation? Is this a false flag that's being used against the American people, black, brown, red, yellow, and white? And what are the real stories that are going on outside of, again, the social engineering, the social steering of the people and the sheeple around this case of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman? Because as I shared with you with the living legend, that it was 20 years ago, to be exact, that when one of the biggest stories in the history of this country broke, that the world was glued. The world and the citizens inside the United States were being socially engineered and socially steered toward the O.J. Simpson trial and the O.J. Simpson verdict, which they, of course, gave to you, sold to you in many forms and many fashions, from in your salons to your boutiques to your barber shops and beauty shops, that there were, of course, just constant barrage of O.J. Simpson and the Simpson case and murder. And you knew less at the end of the case than, for the most part, that you knew at the beginning of the case. But nevertheless, what I'm talking about is that the biggest story that had broke and was uncovered by our sister, who was the first black to head the Department of Energy, the Energy Secretary, Hazel O'Leary, who talked about this book entitled The Plutonium Files, and how it had come out that this government, for over 50 years or more during the Cold War, had experimented on American citizens, black, brown, red, yellow, and white. They experimented on men, they experimented on women, they experimented on children using plutonium. But yet they'll tell you about other countries using weapons of mass destruction. Now, I don't know if you saw the article about depleted uranium that's in the airport there in Florida. So I'd keep your eye out on Florida, because they clearly are not done with what is going on in Florida right now. But let me go to this quick musical break. So we're talking about that clearly a lot of this may be some illusions regarding what's going on. But I'm going to go to this quick musical break, and then we're going to come back in and get into more of the state of the city and talk about the great elder, Harry Belafonte, and the work that he is doing with our young people, there in Florida, occupying the Florida State House to, again, force the governor there to look at changing some laws around a state law for Trayvon Martin and the Trayvon Martin Act. Also to look at, again, ending the school-to-prison pipeline around black youth, brown youth, and others. And I believe one of their third goals is to stop this zero tolerance of black youth and brown youth and youth behavior in the public school systems or the killing fields where our young people are suspended for the most minimum reasons in the schools right now. And a lot of that is because, again, crime pays. And so if they can suspend you or expel you in terms of that, and then you are out in the streets, or they will put you in one of these alternative schools, then they are fast tracking you clearly to the prison industrial complex right now, in which they're looking to privatize the prisons, which I'll talk about shortly regarding in the state of Maryland with that staged meeting the other day, which took place with the public safety or public corrupt secretary, Gary Maynard, along with some elected or selected officials, because they don't want elected officials that are beholding to the citizens in the state, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, but they want handpicked, selected officials that is beholding to the governor, beholding to the Senate President Mike Miller, and beholding to the Speaker of the House, Michael Bush, but not to the citizens in the state of Maryland, to look at, again, what has been going on around the issue of the corrections, and the corrections in terms of the jails and prisons, not just in Baltimore City, but statewide. As I saw, I think an officer was assaulted the other night. I think this was in Western Maryland. But yet the news media, I don't even think they reported on that. So when an officer was assaulted, they were on lockdown. But yet they didn't report on that. So it lets you see how they want to sex up the story regarding, again, the Baltimore Detention Center and central booking, but not, again, look at the bigger picture of what's happening in prisons and what's happening to prisoners and inmates inside system-wide this system, and then what's happening to correctional officers inside of the system, and then the public who has to go inside of the system. So none of that still has not been fully addressed. And again, if there were broken cameras and you have those who are responsible for the cameras, should not they be sued? Should not they be sued? But if you got Maynard trying to protect them, to circle the wagon around O'Malley, circle the wagon around Brown, circle the wagon around that schmuck Doug Gansler, who's now come out to say something only because he, of course, wants to run for governor, but he's been their partner in crime and their partner in time and partner in grime and partner in slime in terms of what's been going on in the Baltimore Detention Center and what's been going on in central booking. And it hasn't been addressed. But your governor, who wants to run for a national office, and maybe if they don't give that Homeland Security Secretary position to Ray Kelly, Mr. Stop and Frisk, along with his former mayor up there, Rudolph the cross-dressing Giuliani, Mr. Stop and Frisky. If you don't know the real story about him, Rudolph Giuliani, Mr. Stop and Frisky, that cross-dresser, that's another story maybe for another day. But nevertheless, talking about perhaps making Ray Kelly the Secretary of Homeland Security. So they're clearly putting their pieces in place on the chessboard if you haven't been able to figure that out right now. Along with John Brennan, the head of the CIA. Mr. Drone, if Barack Obama is the Drone Ranger, then John Brennan is Tonto. John Brennan is Tonto. And they will not stop and think twice about using drones on the American people in this country. Don't you ever forget that. Black, brown, red, yellow, and white. But again, around this so-called prison scandal, it's game, man. It's game is what we're looking at. It's coming from your governor and coming from others. So let me go to this clip talking about Harry Belafonte. We won't take the musical break. Let me go to this clip talking about Harry Belafonte, standing with our young people in Florida around the issue of, again, for me, not stand your ground, but again, taking a strong stand and not grandstanding as Sharpton and Morial and Jealous are doing, because they haven't called for a boycott of the state of Florida, from the tourism industry to the convention industry to, as we've been asking for and demanding, against the Florida juice makers, Tropicana, Florida Citrus, Minute Maid, Simply, and last but surely not least, dishonorable mention, Gatorade, which, as I said before, is targeted toward black youth. So we can do it. All you got to do is put your mind to it. and be willing to do it. And if you have others to tell you don't do it, then you already know that they really don't want to see no justice in this country. All they want to see is just us. But again, you should keep your eyes open to the big stories of what's going on. So let me go to this clip. Then we're going to come back in and talk about the distractions and the factions and the fractions and ask what are some of the other real stories that's going on in this country and outside of this country other than Trayvon Martin, because, again, they're basically eat, sleep, and drink. Trayvon Martin being force-fed on the American people, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, to create racial divisions, to create class divisions, to create mind-blowing decisions that's going to lead to some head-on collisions inside of this country, while, again, the bigger picture of what's going on from the economy to we're on the brink of World War III, World War IV, to the red lines that's been drawn in the sand in the Middle East, or red lines that your president's been given by members of JINSA, members of the Zionist element in the fifth colony operating inside of America right now. And, of course, the red lines that's been given to them by, again, the Roman authority that's tied into some of these other, again, cataclysmic, apocalyptic events that are about to go down on the planet, that while you're caught up in the fractions and the factions and the distractions, you're not even aware. So it's going to take those that are aware to at least say, look, there's more to what's really going on than what you think. You got to think outside the box, or as Taco Bell said, think outside the bun regarding what's going on. But let me go to this clip talking about, again, a great actor and activist, singer, songwriter, musician, 86-year-old Harry Belafonte there in Florida standing with our young people. And then we'll come back in and get into more of the state of the city. So listen to this message, and we'll be right back with more.
Singer and entertainer Harry Belafonte called on Florida Governor Rick Scott to listen to protesters who were asking for a special legislative session to examine the state's self-defense laws following the acquittal of George Zimmerman. Protesters have occupied the Capitol since July 15th, or 3 days after a jury cleared Zimmerman of charges in the killing of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin.
That was the clip. Didn't have a long one that I wanted to give you, but just letting you see. I'll come back in over the next couple of days and go into that, looking at, again, Harry Belafonte taking the stand that he's taken with our young people there in Florida. And so that's very important in terms of seeing that elder do that. But we have to have others that will stand with our young people, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, those of goodwill that really want to see this country rise, as opposed to seeing this country, again, going through its demise right now. When I say demise, I mean due to the factions and the fractions and the perversions and the diversions that are being given to the American people. So let me get into some of these other, again, stories, as I shared with you before, in terms of what could be going on, and again, that you're being distracted from around the world and around the planet, as we look at Israel, red line in Syria, and the East, red line or the red herring. Again, as I said before, that the old ace of spade has always been used in this country by the 1% or the 10%ers, is racism and classism to keep us divided, to force America perhaps into World War III. As we saw in history, I believe there was a gentleman by the name of Zimmerman that was a double agent that worked to, again, trick America into World War I. So here we are, 100 years since World War I, 1913, and we're back at 2013. That number 13 again, as well as the 100-year establishment of the Federal Reserve, which took place in 1913. The 100th year, I believe, establishment of the IRS, 1913, or the FBI, 1913, and the ADL of B'nai B'rith, 1913. Let's go a little further. As I said before, also there was a astronomical planetary alignment of the Star of David, which occurred on July the 1st and July the 22nd. So I would have to remind you of, when was it announced that the so-called new baby that was born to Harry and whatever his wife is, Katie or Kathy. Now, there's nothing royal about them for some of you that be tripping now, you know. Some of you wannabes that you finding more faith in their baby's birthright than your own child. But they're part of the royal blue bloodline based on, again, the Illuminati bloodline. So that was announced on that day, on July the 22nd, that number 22, if you haven't been able to figure that out now, dealing with, again, numerology. But also, we're looking at, again, as I said before, the world could be on the brink of World War III with China and Russia and what is happening in Syria. There are those that talked about Israel and how Israel used a nuclear weapon on May the